Hey everyone, this is Elissa here with She Does Credit. I just wanted to personally congratulate Daniel and Kiyaya on their 100th episode. Congratulations, you guys. And you can find me, Elissa, She Does Credit, on the Root Rangers Network, SheDoesCredit.com, and on Instagram at She Does Credit. See you guys soon. Bye, Daniel and Kiyaya.
Bunnicula Tuesdays are back with Chapter 7 of 8 of James Howe's 40th anniversary edition of Bunnicula. It all starts now on Let's Get Cozy. It's story time with Kiyaya and Daniel.
Stories are such an important part of our lives. Join my friend Kiyaya and I for Get Cozy, because it's story time with Kiyaya and Daniel, where we share some of the greatest picture books and chapters from children's and young adult literature to inspire you to keep embedding literacy into your days.
Chapter 7. A New Friend, Indeed. In the days that followed, Chester's behavior was exemplary. He purred and cooed, and he cleaned his paws, and he rubbed up against everyone's legs to show what a good boy he was. I was getting worried. Chester acts that way only when he has something devious in the back of his mind. But I didn't know what it was. He had tried everything in the book to get rid of vampires, and all his efforts had failed. But I knew from the expression on his face that something was definitely up. Of course, I didn't know for certain, because he had not spoken to me since the stake incident. I guess he realized that my heart just wasn't in the destruction of the bunny vampire. In fact, I was beginning to like the little fellow. The Monroes were relieved that by Chester's improved behavior, they didn't know how to account for his strange doings, but to their credit, they were willing to let bygones be bygones. The only disturbing factor in all our lives was the reappearance of the white vegetables each morning in the kitchen, and yet, after a few days, even that stopped, and life seemed to return to normal. One evening I dropped by Bunnicula's cage to chat. I found myself doing that more and more since Chester had stopped talking to me. Of course, Bunnicula didn't talk back, but he was a good listener. I'd begun to think of him as a friend, a strange one, granted, but one can't always choose one's friends. I was distressed this particular evening to see that he was dragging his ears, as it were. He looked tired and listless. I felt his nose, and it seemed a little warmer than it should have been. I became alarmed. I ran over to Toby, who was doing a picture puzzle on the floor, and began to bark. Something I do only in cases of extreme emergency, since I do not care for the sound. "What's the matter there, Harold?" Toby asked without moving. "Are there burglars?" I ran to the cage and looked at Bunnicula. I looked back at Toby and whimpered. Toby just looked confused. "Do you want to play with Bunnicula? Shall I take him out of the cage?" "Woof!" I responded, indicating I hoped that was indeed what he should do. "I'll ask Mom and Dad, Harold. You wait here." He was back in a minute, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Harold, but Mom says you can't play with the rabbit. It causes too much commotion." I looked down at the floor and whimpered again. "Sorry, Harold. Maybe later, when we're all in here together." I regarded Bunnicula, whose eyes met mine. He gave a little shudder. and I felt like crying. My friend was sick, and I didn't know what to do. I wished I could tell Chester, but I knew it was no use. He was just too mad at me. I would have to sort this one out on my own. That night I couldn't sleep worrying about Bunnicula. I decided to go downstairs and check on his condition. What I saw when I entered the room horrified me. While Chester stood in front of him, a piece of garlic around his neck and his arms outstretched, blocking the kitchen door, suddenly it all fell into place. Chester was starving Bunnicula. Of course, that's why he seemed so listless, and that's why the vegetables had stopped turning white. Chester had made it impossible for Bunnicula to eat. Chester! I cried. Chester jumped a very high jump. What are you doing down here? He spat at me as he landed. I know what you're doing, Chester, and the jig is up. That little bunny never hurt anyone. All he's doing is eating his own way. What do you care if he drains a few vegetables? He's a vampire, Chester snarled. Today vegetables, tomorrow the world. I think perhaps you're overstating your case, I suggested cautiously. Go back to bed, Harold. This is larger than the two of us. It may seem harsh, but I'm only being cruel to be kind. Who is he being kind to? I wondered as I went back upstairs. The tomatoes and zucchinis of the world? Maybe a few cabbages? It just didn't make sense. But I could see I wasn't going to get anywhere with Chester tonight. Tomorrow, however, would be another story. And I was determined that by hook or by crook, my friend Bunnicula would eat by sundown the next day. Disaster in the dining room. I realized that there was nothing I could do for Bunnicula during the day since he was sleeping, but that gave me time to plan my strategy. At first I thought I would bring food to his cage, but then it occurred to me that Chester must be taking everything away that was given to him. Pete and Toby usually left lettuce for Bunnicula during the day while he was sleeping, and Chester, ever watchful, probably nabbed it each evening just before the rabbit woke. No, there would have to be another way. I thought and thought all afternoon, and I could see that Chester had done a good job of isolating Bunnicula from his food. There was no way I could think of to overcome Chester's game plan. As evening drew closer, I grew more and more frantic. I stumbled into the dining room and saw the answer to my problem sitting before me on the table. It was a big bowl of salad. All I had to do was get Bunnicula to the salad and let him get his fill before the family came to eat. With that funny white dressing on it, they would never notice if a few vegetables were white. I ran to the hallway to check the clock, 6:15. It would be 15 minutes before the sun went down and Bunnicula woke up. I would then need at least 5 minutes to get him from his cage to the table and feed him. All I had to do was make sure no one came into the room until he had finished. I needed a good 20 minutes at least. I went back into the living room. Chester was asleep in the brown velvet chair, shedding in his sleep, still worn out from the previous night's activities. I checked upstairs. Toby was reading in his room the last chapter of Treasure Island. I noted. Pete, who should have been doing his homework, was listening to records in his room. I ran down to the kitchen. Hello, Harold, Mrs. Monroe said as I came through the door. What's new? Other than a rabbit starving in the next room and an imminent attack on your salad bowl, nothing, I thought. I stood at her feet and panted. She scratched my head. This gave me a moment to check out how far she was in her cooking. Sorry, Harold, she said. I have to baste this chicken. I noticed the oven timer still at 35 minutes to go. It'll be tight, I thought, but I can make it. Now, where is Mr. Monroe? I went to the front door and whimpered loudly. Mrs. Monroe, followed me. Are you waiting for Daddy, Harold? He'll be home soon. Soon isn't good enough. How soon? I whimpered again. Patience, boy. He's late at a school meeting. He should be here any time. To cat observers, this is known as the attack position. Run, Bunnicula! I shouted. Bunnicula turned in my direction as if to ask where. Anywhere, I cried. Just get out of his way. Chester sprang. Bunnicula jumped. And in a flash of a second, they had changed positions. Chester now found himself flat on his back, owing to the slipperiness of the salad dressing in the bowl, and Bunnicula, too dazed to even think about food now, hovered, quivering, on the table. Chester was having a great deal of difficulty getting back on his feet, but I knew it was only a matter of seconds before he'd attack again. And I knew also that Bunnicula was too petrified to do anything to save himself. So I did the only thing I could. I barked, very loudly and very rapidly. The whole family rushed through the doors. Mr. Monroe must have just come home because his coat was still on. Oh no! Cried Mrs. Monroe. That's it, Chester. This is Chester's last stand. Chester rolled his eyes heavenward and didn't even try to move. Mom, said Toby, tugging at his mother's arm, look at Bunnicula. How did he get out of his cage? He looks scared. Of course he's scared, said Mrs. Monroe. We probably forgot to latch his cage and he got out. And I think Chester has been chasing him. Toby put his face close to the rabbit. Mom, doesn't Bunnicula look kind of sick? We better take him to the vet to see if any damage was done, she answered. I started to whimper. No need for me to go to the vet. Mr. Monroe patted my head. We may as well take Harold along, he said. He's probably due for his shots. Mrs. Monroe carefully picked up Chester out of the salad bowl and carried him by the scruff of the neck to the kitchen. I'm going to give Chester a quick bath, she said to Mr. Monroe. Why don't you put together a fresh salad? Toby, you and Peter put Bunnicula back in his cage, and then clean up the table. I didn't stick around for an assignment. This was not the time to be in the way. And besides, I now had an evening and night ruined worrying about the next morning's visit to the vet. This little effort of mine, I thought, has been a disaster in more ways than one. I know it's getting exciting, but next week, Kiyaya is the last chapter of Bunnicula. I know, I'm sorry to see it end too. Bunnicula Tuesdays will conclude next week with Chapter 9. All's well that ends well. Almost. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of It's Kozy. It's story time with Kiyaya and Daniel. And remember, reading is power.